It all happened on Halloween night. I'll begin at trick-or-treating. The sky was dark and the moon shone bright. My friends and I ran down the street, excited and giggling. Our bags swung by our sides, already heavy with candy. We yelled, "Trick-or-treat!" at every door we knocked on. The neighbors smiled and gave us candy that smelled sweet and delicious. I felt happy and full of energy. After a while, we decided to try a new street. We crossed the road, our laughter echoing in the cool night air. Everywhere we looked, kids in costumes rushed from house to house, just like us. The Halloween spirit felt alive, and I loved it. As we walked, I spotted a house at the end of the block. It looked old and dark, with a crooked fence and tall weeds growing everywhere. The porch light flickered, giving it a spooky vibe. I felt a tingle of excitement and fear. "Hey, look at that house!" I shouted, pointing. My friends stopped and looked over. "No way, that place is creepy," Lily said, her eyes wide. "Yeah, I heard a story about it," Tommy added, shivering a little. "Rumor has it that a kid went there last Halloween, and then he disappeared." "What do you mean?" I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. "They say he knocked on the door and never came back," Tommy exclaimed. I looked back at the house, my heart racing. It did look scary, but part of me was curious. "Come on, it's Halloween. Let's check it out. What if they have candy?" Max, always ready for an adventure, nodded eagerly. "Let's go, it'll be fun." Lily looked nervous. "I don't know. It really does look scary." "Just a quick look," I said, trying to sound brave. I didn't want to be the only one who stayed back. We walked closer to the house, our feet crunching on the dry leaves. The closer we got, the creepier the house seemed. The wooden porch creaked under our weight as we climbed the steps. I glanced back at my friends. They looked just as scared as I felt. Max knocked on the door with a loud thud. We waited, hearts pounding. The sound echoed in the silence of the night. I felt a mix of excitement and fear. What would happen? After a moment, the door creaked open slowly. A tall man stood there, his face shadowed in the dim light. He had dark hair and deep-set eyes that seemed to watch us closely. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It felt cold and eerie. "Hello, kids," he said in a low voice. "What do you want?" "Trick or treat," we shouted, trying to sound cheerful, even though I felt scared. The man's smile widened, but something in his eyes made me uneasy. "I don't have any candy," he said, "but you can come in for some pizza." My heart raced. No thanks," I replied quickly. I felt a knot in my stomach. The man didn't seem right. Tommy whispered, "Let's go." But before we could turn to leave, the man insisted, "Please, come in. I promise it'll be fun." The door was still open, and I felt a strange pull to step inside. I glanced at my friends, and they looked unsure. But Max, always up for an adventure, nodded and said, "Let's go." We hesitated, but finally stepped into the house, our excitement mixed with fear. The inside was dark, filled with shadows and dust. Just as we entered, I heard my mom's voice calling from outside. "Kids, what are you doing? Come back." Panic surged through me. The man immediately closed the front door, and I felt trapped. "What are we doing?" I asked my friends, my heart pounding. Suddenly, I noticed that the back door was slightly open. "Over there!" I shouted, and we bolted toward it. We pushed through the door and stumbled out into the yard, racing away from the house. We ran down the street, our hearts pounding and breaths coming in quick gasps. When we reached our moms, they rushed over with worried faces. "What were you thinking?" my mom asked, kneeling down to look at me. "You shouldn't go to strange houses." "We were just checking it out," I said, feeling embarrassed. "That place is dangerous," another mom added. "You kids should never go there. I've heard stories about it." I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't want to think about what could have happened if we had gone inside. My friends and I nodded, agreeing to stay away from that house forever. The fun of Halloween faded away. We went back to trick-or-treating, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Each time I heard a creak or a rustle, I thought of the man with the strange smile. Finally, we returned home. I dumped my candy on the kitchen table, but I couldn't enjoy it. My mom was making hot chocolate, but my mind kept drifting back to the house. What if we had gone in? What would have happened? "What's wrong?" my mom asked, noticing my distracted look. I hesitated, thinking of how to explain. There was a house at the end of the street, a scary one. "What happened?" she asked, concerned. I told her everything, how the man had wanted us to come in. Her face turned serious. "You need to be careful, especially on Halloween. Not everyone is nice. Promise me you'll stay away from places like that." "I promise," I said, but my curiosity still lingered. The days went by and Halloween became just a memory. I went back to school and my friends and I talked about the candy we collected. But the thought of the creepy house haunted me. One afternoon as I walked home, I found myself passing that house again. The sun was shining and everything looked different. It didn't seem as scary in the daylight. My heart raced with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Just one quick look," I told myself. I took a deep breath and approached the house. The porch creaked as I stepped closer. The door was slightly ajar, and I felt a strange urge to see what was inside. I pushed the door open a little wider and it creaked loudly. I stepped inside, my heart pounding. The room was dark and dusty, filled with old furniture covered in sheets. My stomach churned, but I felt drawn to explore. As I moved further into the house, I heard a soft sound coming from the back. My heart raced, but I wanted to know what it was. I walked slowly toward the sound, feeling both scared and curious. When I reached the kitchen, I saw a small box on the table. I opened it, and inside were old photos and letters. One photo caught my eye. It was the man, but he looked different. He was smiling and standing with a group of kids. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned quickly, my heart in my throat. It was the man. He stood at the door, watching me with that same cold smile. "Ah. What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low. "I was just looking," I stammered, feeling terrified. "You shouldn't be here. Leave now," he warned. I nodded quickly, realizing I had made a mistake. I turned and ran, bursting through the door and back into the sunlight. I didn't stop until I was safely home. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the house. I didn't know what happened that night, or why the man wanted to invite us inside, and I really didn't want to know. But as I grew older, I began to piece together the puzzle of what he was doing, why my mom had called me just in time. If my mom hadn't been there, hadn't called me, I didn't even want to imagine what would have happened, and I really didn't want to know. Hello, my name is Chris, and the incident I'm about to tell you is the scariest thing I've ever been through. I really wish I could forget it, but it's stuck in my mind, and no matter how hard I try, I can't shake it. It happened on Halloween night, and even now, just thinking about it makes my skin crawl. It had been raining all day, and by the time evening came, the rain had only gotten worse. It wasn't just a regular rain either, it was a heavy downpour, the kind that makes everything feel darker and colder. The streets were flooded with puddles and the sky was covered in thick clouds. The rain was so loud it drowned out almost every other sound. I pulled up my hood trying to keep dry but it didn't help much. I was soaked and all I wanted was to get home. I was walking alone, heading down a narrow alley that I always used to cut through on my way home. It wasn't the nicest place to walk, especially at night, but it was faster. There were a few old streetlights lining the alley, flickering in the rain, giving off just enough light for me to see where I was going. The ground was wet and slick, and the sound of the rain hitting the pavement was constant. Suddenly, a huge crack of thunder shook the sky, so loud that it made me jump. In that instant, the streetlights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. The alley was plunged into total darkness. I stopped, feeling my heart pound in my chest. It was just the storm knocking the power out, I told myself. There was nothing to worry about. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, turning on the flashlight. The small beam of light cut through the rain, just enough for me to see a few feet ahead. I started walking again, telling myself to stay calm. It was just rain, just a storm, nothing more. But then I heard something. It wasn't the rain. There was a rustling sound coming from the trees that lined the edge of the alley. stopped, straining to listen. At first I thought it might be the wind, but it didn't sound like it. It sounded more like footsteps, like someone or something was moving through the bushes. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. There was no answer, just more rustling. My heart started beating faster. I shone my flashlight toward the trees, but the rain made it hard to see anything clearly. I didn't want to move closer, but curiosity got the better of me. I took a few steps toward the edge of the alley, shining my light into the trees. That's when I saw him. A clown. He was standing just behind one of the trees, his face half hidden by the branches. His white face paint stood out in the darkness, with a red smile painted wide across his mouth. His eyes were fixed on me, unblinking, like he had been waiting for me to notice him. "Hey," the clown said softly, almost too quiet to hear over the rain. His voice was calm, almost friendly, but it sent shivers down my spine. "Can you help me?" I froze. My brain was screaming at me to turn around and leave, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at him, my flashlight shaking in my hand. "There's a guy over here," the clown continued, stepping out from behind the tree. He gestured to the darkness behind him. "He needs help. Just come over here." My stomach twisted in fear. I didn't know what to say or do. Everything inside me was telling me this was wrong, that I needed to get out of there, but my legs wouldn't move. "No," I finally managed to say, backing up a step. "I don't think so." The clown didn't stop smiling. He took another step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "Come on," he said, his voice a little more insistent now. "I'll show you something cool. Just follow me." "No," I said again, louder this time, backing away even more. My heart was pounding in my chest now, and I could feel the panic rising inside me. I turned and started walking away, my footsteps quick and uneven. The rain was still pouring down, but all I could hear was the sound of my own breathing and the pounding of my heart. I didn't look back. I just wanted to get out of there. But then I heard it. Footsteps behind me, quick and heavy, splashing in the puddles. I risked a glance over my shoulder and my blood ran cold. The clown was following me. I picked up my pace, walking faster, almost running now, but so did he. The footsteps behind me grew louder, closer. I turned around again, and that's when I saw it. The clown was running after me, and in his hands he was holding a chainsaw. It wasn't running yet, but he was gripping it tight, like he was ready to start it at any second. I panicked. I ran as fast as I could, my feet slipping on the wet ground, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The clown was right behind me, his footsteps pounding the ground as he chased me through the alley. I ran and ran, my heart racing, my legs burning, until finally, when I thought I couldn't run any faster, I glanced back, and he was gone. Just like that. The alley was empty. The only sound was the rain, still pouring down, and my own ragged breathing. I didn't stop running until I was safely home, slamming the door behind me, locking it, and collapsing on the floor, soaked and shaking. I don't know what that clown wanted. I don't know why he chased me with that chainsaw, or why he called me behind the tree in the first place. And honestly, I don't want to know. I'm just happy he's gone. I was grounded on Halloween, all because I forgot to clean my room. My mom and dad said I had to stay home all night. No candy, no friends. I couldn't even wear my costume. So I sat in my room, looking out the window, watching everyone else having fun. It felt so unfair. I mean, I messed up, but not that bad, right? My friends were all out trick-or-treating, laughing and carrying big bags full of candy. And I had to sit inside and miss it all. The worst part? My new neighbor had just moved in and everyone said he was giving out the best candy. Full-size chocolate bars, special treats from other countries, all the good stuff. I'd been waiting all week to try some. After a while, I got tired of just watching from my window. I kept looking over at the big, dark house next door. I'd never met the guy, but he seemed interesting. The house always looked kind of spooky, with the lights low and the windows dusty. But everyone said he was nice and super generous with candy. So I made up my mind I'd sneak out just for a little bit. My parents were already in bed. I'd hop over the fence, grab a few pieces from his porch, and be back in no time. Easy. I tiptoed to the back door, carefully turning the knob so it wouldn't make a sound. The night air was cold and the wind was strong. It made the trees in our yard creak and groan, like they were whispering secrets. I took a deep breath, walked through our backyard, and climbed over the fence into my neighbor's yard. It was so quiet there. All I could hear was the soft rustling of leaves and the faint hoot of an owl somewhere far off. I crouched low and looked around. The lights in his house were mostly off, but I could see a faint glow from the porch, and there was a big bowl of candy sitting right there, just like everyone said. I walked slowly, trying not to make a sound, moving toward the candy bowl. I peered into it and saw giant chocolate bars, packs of gum, and even some rare candies I'd never seen before. I reached out, my hand shaking with excitement. Then I heard it, a loud thump coming from somewhere inside the house. I froze, my hand hovering over the candy bowl. I looked around, trying to figure out where the sound had come from. The noise was coming from the back of the house, and that's when I noticed something strange. The sliding glass door at the back of the house was open. It was wide open, like someone had left in a hurry. I felt a shiver go down my spine. Maybe he had a dog or something, I thought. Or maybe he'd just forgotten to close the door. I told myself it was no big deal, but then I heard another sound. A scraping noise, like something heavy being dragged across the floor. It was coming from downstairs, from the basement. I should have turned around and gone back home, but something made me take a step forward, then another. I don't know why, but I was curious. I wanted to see what was going on. I walked toward the open door, stepping as quietly as I could. The glass door slid shut behind me with a quiet click. The house felt cold and empty, but I could still hear the noises coming from the basement. I looked down the hall and saw that the basement door was open too. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might explode. I felt like a kid in a horror movie, the one who makes the bad choice and gets in trouble. But still, I couldn't stop. I took a step down, then another, holding my breath, hoping the stairs wouldn't creak. When I reached the bottom, I peeked around the corner. My neighbor was standing there, in the middle of the room, facing a big wooden table. He was hunched over, doing something with his hands, but I couldn't see what. The room was dark except for one small light hanging above him, casting strange, spooky shadows on the walls. I squinted, trying to see better, but all I could make out were shapes. He was moving something around, lifting it and setting it down, like he was working on a project. And then he stopped. He didn't move or say anything, just stopped. Slowly, he turned his head and looked right at me. His eyes were wide and unblinking, and his face looked pale in the dim light. He didn't say a word, didn't ask why I was there. He just stared, his gaze piercing, like he was trying to read my mind. I felt frozen. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't even look away. Then he took a slow step toward me. Suddenly, the fear kicked in. My legs started working again, and I turned and ran up the stairs, not daring to look back. I could hear his footsteps behind me, slow and steady at first, then faster, like he was chasing me. I reached the top of the stairs and slammed the basement door shut. My hands were shaking so bad, but I managed to turn the lock just as he reached the door. I could hear him on the other side, his hand trying the handle, testing it. I backed away, heart pounding, and then ran out the glass door, sprinted across the yard, and jumped over the fence back to my own house. I didn't stop until I was safely back in my room. I locked my door and sat on my bed trying to catch my breath. I couldn't stop thinking about his face, the way he had stared at me, like he was mad, but also like he knew something. I don't know what he was doing down in that basement. I don't know why he got so mad when he saw me. And I never told my parents about it. I never told anyone. But every Halloween, when I see a bowl of candy on a porch or an open door, I think about that night. I think about the basement, the sounds, and the way he looked at me. No, I don't even care about candy. It's just not worth it. Not after that Halloween night. Halloween was always my favorite time of year. I loved dressing up, finding the perfect costume, and wandering through Halloween stores filled with spooky decorations. So, when I saw a new Halloween shop downtown that I'd never noticed before, I was curious. I hadn't heard anything about it, but the old creaky sign and strange decorations drew me in. The store was dimly lit, with shelves packed full of costumes, masks, and decorations. Everything had a worn, dusty look to it, like the store had been there for years. But I knew it hadn't been there last Halloween. As I wandered down the aisles, I felt a chill run down my spine. It was strange, the store was completely empty, and every time I glanced around, I felt like something was just out of sight, watching. I kept searching for the perfect costume, but nothing really caught my eye. Suddenly, a man appeared beside me. He was wearing a manager's name tag that read, James. He looked like he'd been working here forever, with slightly messy hair and an easygoing smile. "Do you need any help?" he asked in a quiet voice. "Oh yeah, actually. I'm looking for a costume, but I don't know what I want yet," I said, glancing around at the shelves. James nodded like he understood perfectly. "I have just the thing. Follow me." I followed him through the store, past aisles I hadn't noticed before. The shelves got dustier, the lights even dimmer. Soon we reached a door at the back of the store labeled Staff Only. I stopped, hesitating. This is for staff only," I said. James smiled and nodded reassuringly. "It's fine, just come with me." Just as I was about to step through the door, a woman appeared, dressed as a store employee. Her face was pale, and she looked worried. "Where are you going?" she asked me, her voice almost a whisper. "This is the staff section." I pointed at James beside me, but he was gone. Just like that. No sound, no sign of him, nothing. There was a guy named James here. He was helping me," I said, glancing around, confused. The woman gave me a strange look. "There's no one named James here. I've worked here for years, and I'd know if we had a James." She shook her head, muttering to herself, and then turned to me with a frown. "If you don't need anything else, please leave the staff area." My heart started pounding, and I quickly left the back room. I couldn't shake the feeling that something strange had happened. Who was that man? And why did the employees say there was no James? I left the store feeling more confused than ever, but by the time I got home, I had a plan. The next day I would go back and see if I could figure out what was going on. The following day I walked back to the store. The sign outside creaked in the breeze, and everything looked just as old and dusty as the day before. Inside, I went straight to the counter, where an older woman was working. "Excuse me," I said, trying to sound casual. "Can I talk to your manager?" She looked at me with a raised eyebrow. "I'm the manager. What can I help you with?" I came here yesterday, and a man named James helped me. He took me to the staff-only section, and I thought maybe I could find him." The woman's expression changed, her face paling slightly. She shook her head, but her voice was steady. "There is no James who works here, and no one should have taken you into the staff area." A shiver went down my spine. "Are you sure?" I asked, feeling the hairs on my neck stand up. She nodded firmly. "I'm sure. Now please, if there's nothing else..." Without knowing what else to say, I backed out of the store, my mind racing. As I reached the sidewalk, I stopped, thinking about what I'd seen. Maybe the security cameras could tell me what had happened. I turned around, went back inside, and asked if I could see the footage. Reluctantly, the manager led me to a small back office with a security monitor. She rewound the footage to the day before, and we watched as I walked through the aisles, talking, but there was no one there. I was completely alone. The screen showed me, nodding, talking, and following someone who simply wasn't there. The manager looked at me, her face even paler now. "What were you doing in the staff area by yourself?" I don't know," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the screen. As I left the store, I tried to make sense of it all. Had I imagined James? Was he some kind of ghost? I had no answers, just an eerie feeling that I couldn't shake. I went back the next day, but this time, the store wasn't there. The whole building was empty, like it had never been there at all. To this day, I don't know who James was, if he was even real, or what would have happened if I'd gone through that staff-only door with him. All I know is that every Halloween since, I've felt like someone was watching me, just out of sight.